Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us on All 24 News. Special news coverage today continues in the aftermath of Iran's retaliation after the Zionist attack on the Iranian consulate in Damascus, which resulted in the death of senior Revolutionary Guard leaders. Tehran launched a complex attack on Zionist military sites, namely the Ramon and Negev air bases located in the occupied territories. The operation, described as limited in scope, was confirmed by Mohammad Bagheri, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the Iranian Armed Forces. Iran's foreign ministry emphasized the defensive nature of the strikes, asserting Tehran's commitment to regional and international space and security. The event is described by many observers as historic and a first. And before we bring in our guests, let's get more on this event by Islam Sid in this report.
In the Middle East, tensions are escalating, raising concerns of a potential large-scale conflict. The trigger was the Zionist attack on the Iranian consulate in Damascus, which prompted Iran's first-ever direct retaliation with waves of drones and missiles. Tehran reported that half of the missiles launched towards the Zionist entity hit the targets, with Revolutionary Guard commander Hossein Salami stating that Iranian weapons breached Zionist air defenses, destroying 2 key military sites.
Dozens of drones, cruise ships, and ballistic missiles at appropriate intervals were able to destroy these deep layers of seemingly reassuring air defense of the Zionist regime and affect the air defense alliance between America, France, and the Zionist regime and reduce it. We consider this operation successful, and this operation has ended in our opinion, and there is no intention to continue it. If the United States participate in the next aggressive actions of the Zionists, and this information is confirmed for us, the American bases, personnel, and facilities will not have security in the region, and we see America as an aggressor, and we will deal with it as well.
Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi backed this retaliatory move, warning of a heavy response to new threats against Tehran's interests, and praising recent strikes on Zionist military sites as proportionate actions.
We targeted some Zionist military sites with missiles and drones in a responsible and proportionate step. The Iranian forces taught the Zionist enemy a lesson, and any new adventure will be met with a heavier response.
Meanwhile, Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir-Abdollahian affirmed Iran's reluctance to prolong defensive operations, but stressed readiness to defend against aggression. He also criticized the UN Security Council for failing to deter the Zionist entity and uphold international laws, adding to the growing tension in the region.
We announced to the White House in a message this morning that our operations will be limited and minimal, with the aim of legitimate defense and punishment of the Israeli regime. The international community calls on Iran to show restraint while overlooking Israel's actions. Britain and France blocked the Security Council statement condemning the aggression against our consulate, encouraging Netanyahu to violate laws.
The escalating tensions between Iran and the Zionist entity pose a significant threat to regional stability. Further escalation is real, highlighted by the exchange of threats and retaliatory actions between both sides. Additionally, the potential involvement of external actors adds to the volatility of the situation.
All right, let's bring in our guest. Joining us discussion from London, UK, is Mrs. Yvonne Ridley, political analyst, Middle East specialist, as well as via phone. We're going to have Mr. Lawrence Walker, Deputy Editor-in-Chief energy specialist at Montel News from London as well, with whom we will discuss some energy repercussions on the escalation. And from Ontario, Canada, we are going to be joined as well by Dr. Shafiq Osman, Associate Professor and Doctor in Geopolitics, along with Mr. Ken O'Keefe, author, human rights activist from Chicago. Gentlemen, ma'am, thank you for agreeing to be with us. And let me kick it off with you, Mrs. Yvonne Ridley. So this event actually came to international media as not really a shock, but rather an expected scenario. How did you yourself read the latest development of Iran retaliating against the Israeli strikes against its consulate? And do you expect a new attack from the Zionist side now that Iran announced the end of its operation?
Well, if there was some wisdom here, which sadly has been lacking from Tel Aviv so far, I would have thought that this would mark an end of the actions between Tehran and Tel Aviv. However, I think what we've seen so far is more mock and awe rather than shock and awe from Iran. I think that the Iranian regime has been playing mind games with Washington and Tel Aviv. And of course, this has manifested itself in the reaction and the words almost bordering on hysteria 24 hours ago from the US president, who started briefing the global media that there was going to be this horrendous attack on Tel Aviv. And of course, everyone was looking at the embassies around the world, expecting retaliation for the highly illegal and astonishing attack of Israel on another country's embassy. And you know, we ought to look at this in context. Apart from the odd terrorist strike on embassies around the world, I can't think of a single occasion where a country or a regime has attacked another's embassy. This was unprecedented and smashed through 3,000 years of protocol.
Thank you indeed for these insights. And just to have a look at what kind of repercussions we might have economically, we have Mr. Lawrence Walker. Mr. Lawrence, can you tell us how might this potential response to Iran's barrage of drones and missiles impact the stability of the oil and gas market, especially considering the possibility of further escalation?
Hello. Yes, I mean, obviously for the global oil and gas markets, it's very important at this stage how Israel responds. And I think traders and analysts will be watching very closely over the coming days for any kind of sign, any signal of what this response may be. I mean, the markets are, so we're talking predominantly oil and gas markets for the global market here. They have already been very jittery, and we've seen a lot of, seen an increase in prices in recent days. We hit a 6-month high for the European benchmark crude prices on Friday. Similarly for the America's WTI, also 6-month high. Gas, less so, but we hit a 2-month high. So I think people were, are concerned that the situation could escalate. The thing that we're waiting for now is to see to what extent. And certainly, I think tomorrow, or at least on Monday, we're going to see more increases in prices. But the question is going to be, to what extent.
Speaking about the extent of this impact, what is the worst case scenario here, Mr. Lawrence?
Well, the worst case, in terms of looking at supply, there's certainly a lot of concern about the Strait of Hormuz. If, for example, this is closed, we could see effectively 20% of global oil consumption, 20% of global LNG, or liquefied natural gas exports being impacted. And obviously, that's going to result in, potentially considerable spikes in prices. So I think this is something which people have been, keeping an eye on and concerned about for the time being. I would say that's one of the worst case situations. Obviously, any escalation in the region, anything which brings in other countries into the conflict is going to be a major concern as well.
All right. Let me bring in now Mr. Ken O'Keefe, who's with us live actually from London, but I didn't actually update the graphic team to put it there. So, Mr. Ken O'Keefe, what can we realistically expect after this Iranian retaliation?
I had the good fortune to be able to travel to Iran last year and I was able to see the kind of technology that they have there. And their capacity to even bring down a U.S. drone, which they had displayed, and I was able to see. Iran fully is capable. They have proven this now, and they can hit any target in Israel. The question has always been, will Israel be successful in getting the United States and all of its backers in Europe to really sacrifice American sons and daughters' blood for the Jewish state of Israel? And, it is beyond tragic what we see in Gaza. Gaza's almost lost in this temporarily, but the atrocities being committed there is what's awakened the world. And I believe even in the dumbed down America that I come from, they're not going to tolerate American sons and daughters coming back in body bags because we're going to fight a war against Iran, because Israel wants us to do that. The bottom line is Iran has got a formidable capacity to attack not only Israel, but America, quite frankly, and could really hurt American interests and military capacity in major ways. And as your last guest just discussed, the economics, the downfall of economies around the world, especially with the oil and energy reserves being seriously threatened. We are in a World War III right now. And if it goes into a full-scale Third World War, it is going to be at the behest of the Jewish state of Israel. Let us make no mistake about that. They are driving this entire world to the brink of self-destruction. Mm-hmm. And I ask everybody once again in the audience, Google Samson option. Mm-hmm. Samson option. This is beyond dangerous. And I've been trying to warn humanity about this for a good 20 years now.
Mm-hmm. All right. Speaking about Iran's capability, the Iranian Mehr Agency announced that the Revolutionary Guards employed about 136 Shahid drones in Khaybar for missiles in retaliation against the Zionist entity. Experts noted that these weapons are more sophisticated compared to those previously used by the entity and its allies against Iran in recent months. Back to you, Mrs. Yvonne Ridley. In light of the capabilities that we have just seen highlighted there in the graphs, don't you think that this so-called retaliation was more of a kind of demonstration of deterrent force by Tehran, just to show that they are capable of defending themselves and attacking the Zionist entity at its core, more than a real retaliation?
Yes, I think that, as I said at the beginning, I called this mock and awe, not shock and awe. But yet again, we see the double standards of our political class. A fortnight ago, in broad daylight, Israel, in flagrant breach of international law, bombed an Iranian embassy in Syria. And this was unprecedented. It was a violation of the Vienna Convention, which saw 16 civilians as well as others killed. And the response we saw last night from Iran was exactly what international law permits under Article 51 of the UN Charter. And that is, if any sovereign nation is attacked by another, the right to retaliate in self-defense is permissible. And this is something that America and Israel seem to forget when they reacted in such a hysterical way. The world knew that Iran was going to react at a time and a place of its choosing. And this essentially was very much a mind game between Tehran and Tel Aviv, and it was whoever was going to blink first. And then we got this hysterical reaction from America and Israel as Iran legally struck back under Article 51 of the UN Charter. Now, either America recognizes the rules and regulations within the UN, or it doesn't. Mm-hmm. And there has to be more recognition, I think, of these UN rules and regulations, which, by the way, have been constantly violated by the Zionist state, which has broken more than 200. It has violated or broken more than 200 UN regulations. And Saddam, if you remember, violated, I think it was 12 UN resolutions. We're now into the hundreds with Israel. So if any sovereign nation is attacked by another, the right to retaliate in self-defense is there. It's permissible. And if a rogue state like Israel bombed a British embassy, wouldn't the British be doing exactly the same? Mm-hmm. So
the message here, without law and order, as Mr. Khan O'Keefe said, we are actually bringing the world to destruction. You agree, Ridley?
Well, yes, we are. The West has lost its moral compass. And as usual, we get these bland, knee-jerk reactions from our politicians in France, in Britain, in Germany. I'm still waiting to hear from any Western leader of note to condemn the attack on the Iranian embassy. Mm-hmm. And, until somebody does, Britain, America, Paris, Bonn, they have zero authority unless they start to speak out and treat these acts with even-handedness.
Mm-hmm. Let me bring back Mr. Khan O'Keefe here. So, Mr. Khan O'Keefe, you spoke about the capabilities of Iran earlier. So we have seen drones, surface-to-surface missiles, and cruise missiles were used in this complex attack. Does this show that Iran indeed has the appropriate means to carry out its operation in the event of a new attack from the Zionist side against Iran?
They most certainly do. And they, again, not only have the ability to hurt Israel, and really, literally, Israel cannot fight. Israel was so braggadocious and so arrogant that they thought that they could just go right into Gaza, and never mind what they're doing in the West Bank, which is atrocious, but they thought they could go into Gaza, clean it up, and then be able to focus their attention up to the north, to Syria, and then to Lebanon, and then go ahead and take on Iran. This is what they thought in their delusional, arrogant state. in their supremacist state. It didn't work. They have not been able to achieve anything close to the goal of eliminating Hamas, not even close. If anything, Hamas is stronger now, and I'm going to say flat out what no one will say, respect to Hamas for what happened on October 7th. That was a masterclass of an operation, and when we look at the actual death counts of civilians, most of them were by the Israelis, like the cars that were fleeing, getting hit by Apache helicopters and things like this. What Hamas has done is set off a chain reaction of events, which is leading to the end of Israel. And I will state it again. Israel is done. There is no room for the Jewish state of Israel. It never should have been existed in the first place. The United Nations, in its first criminal act, created a state that dispossessed the Palestinians of historic Palestine and effectively made the apartheid system of genocide entrenched and backed by the United Nations. So I am no fan of the United Nations. We need to eliminate the 5 permanent member veto status. That 5 permanent member veto status has allowed Israel to get away with bloody murder ever since its creation. If we didn't have 5 permanent members and that veto status that America constantly wields in favor of Israel, we wouldn't be in this situation. We need to fix international law, institute international law, and that attack by Israel on the embassy, that is an act of terrorism. If anyone had done that, and attacked an embassy and killed diplomats from a sovereign nation, it would be called what it is. It's terrorism. But because Israel does it, our governments in the West don't even say anything about it. They don't even say anything, which begs the question, who is in charge of our Western governments? Who is in charge? Is it the 0.2% of the Jewish population of the world and the Rothschilds fiefdom known as the Jewish state of Israel? Are they pulling the strings of our governments back in America? Maybe through the Federal Reserve Bank that was created in 1913, maybe? Or maybe the Bank of England, which the Rothschilds have controlled since the 1700s? How is it that our sovereign governments are basically committing political suicide and abandoning all moral authority in favor of this little Jewish state of Israel? How is that possible? I'll tell you, the money and the control of the banks and our corrupt politicians, the moral authority of the United States and Britain has been gone for decades. It hasn't existed, but now it's in mortal threat. And I can tell you, the natives are getting restless over here, the homelessness problems and all of this. And one last thing, if I may, going back to Gaza. God bless my family in Gaza. And this is, God bless you. You, the descendants of Jesus, have made a massive sacrifice as Jesus did for us 2,000 years ago. God bless my family in Gaza. You will never be forgotten.
And just to get back to the economy issue, Mr. Lawrence Walker, we have seen from the latest news wires that the OPEC and its allies are actually paying close attention and monitoring the situation in the Middle East and its potential impact on oil and gas markets here. I mean, similarly, gas-related organizations are doing the same monitoring. So if these tensions continue to escalate, what kind of considerations are we expecting for adjusting production levels, for instance?
Yes, I mean, certainly OPEC and its allies, or the OPEC Plus, will be, watching things very closely. Obviously, I touched a little bit earlier on possible, the potential for disruptions to supply from, via the Strait of Hormuz. What OPEC could do potentially, they could increase production. That would be a way to counter any serious surge in prices. I think back in early March, they extended what they have as sort of a voluntary production cut, which across the organisation of I think 2 million barrels a day. That is until the end of June. They can obviously discuss potentially their next meeting, which I think will be in early June. Revising that or maybe reading that in to some extent. I think they have production capacity, maybe spare capacity of maybe up to 6 million barrels a day. So they could increase production. That's obviously one way of countering any sort of impact on global prices. Likewise, gas. Obviously, we don't have such as an OPEC collective for the gas market. But I mean, already in this conflict, we've seen a response in the market. We've seen redirections of gas. We've seen gas going around sort of the Cape of Good Hope, going around South Africa to avoid avoid sort of the more sort of complicated areas such as the Red Sea, where there's also been attacks linked to the conflicts in Israel from the Houthi rebels attacking shipping. So we're sort of seeing markets adjusting and reorganising itself. But in terms of what can actually be done physically, I mean, for OPEC, I guess we're talking about increases in production, but that will obviously only be if we see some kind of major impact perhaps on the market or some major response from Israel or something which really keeps prices high and triggers a response.
Perfect. And this Iranian retaliation comes as Gaza has been undergoing a true genocide for 7 months, with over 33,000 Palestinians being killed. The Zionist entity continues its war crimes despite numerous calls for a ceasefire and an increasingly significant diplomatic isolation, and especially without having achieved any stated objectives. Here, Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf characterized the provocations by the Zionist occupation as efforts to divert attention from the Palestinian issue during a speech. While hosting Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa, Minister Attaf emphasized that the current escalations and provocations by the Israeli settlements aim to obscure facts related to the Palestinian cause and remove it from international priorities.
وحتى التصعيدات والاستفزازات التي يذكيها حاليا
The escalations and provocations currently being orchestrated by the Israeli settlement occupation in all directions and on multiple fronts are all aimed at diverting attention away from the Palestinian cause, obscuring established facts, and excluding it entirely from the priorities of the international community.
وإقصائها كليا من على سلم أولويات المجموعة الدولية.
Back to you, Mrs. Yvonne Ridley. Do you agree with the statements of the Algerian foreign minister? Is Netanyahu actually seeking to divert attention from what's happening in Gaza?
Do you know, it was so refreshing hearing a country in the Muslim world, the Arab world, speaking out and being critical of what is happening in Gaza. Few countries will call it genocide. Algeria has always been a staunch supporter of Palestine. And so, as I say, it was refreshing to hear a senior minister in the Algerian government criticizing Israel. And, you know, we have to look at Netanyahu. He is a lame duck prime minister. His time is running out, and he is using every trick in the book to obfuscate and delay his departure. That man will end in court. And I look forward to the trial. He has sat over numerous war crimes and must help to account. We know that he has committed other crimes which denigrated the term of office in Tel Aviv, but really what this latest attack, talking about the attack on the embassy, just showed the inviolability of diplomatic means. You know, they have gone largely unharmed and not attacked for more than 3,000 years. And of course, the benchmark about behavior today usually goes to Adolf Hitler and the Second World War. But even then, respected diplomatic missions. And for a country to attack another country's diplomatic mission is beyond the pale. And I'm just wondering how many more red lines is Israel prepared to cross before America reins in and strangles this vile baby that it has created in the Middle East. Because this is a country with nuclear weapons. You know, let's talk about the elephant in the living room today. If Israel is prepared to drive through international law and bomb embassies, what else is it prepared to do? I'm quite fearful that the doomsday clock has now lurched forward another 30 seconds towards Armageddon. This is a rogue state which is out of control and is bringing the rest of the world into a state of uncertainty, unpredictability. And once it hits the corporate markets, that's when we might get action. The blood of the Palestinians isn't a price that America is interested in, or most of the Western countries. And I frankly don't know if the global South will ever forgive us for what has been done to the Palestinians in Gaza.
Perfectly understood. Let me get back to Mr. Kanoukiv now. According to Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf, it is crucial to address the core of the conflict. And what is happening here is the Zionist entity attempting to bury the Palestinian issue or cause. Mr. Kanoukiv, how do you yourself read this?
Yes, it's. I feel it's a big mistake for us to put all of the blame or look for a scapegoat in Netanyahu. But let us be clear about where Netanyahu is today. First off, the man is a criminal, and he would be done for corruption charges lawfully if he wasn't in power. So this very narcissistic, destructive, and supremacist man who is drunk on his own power, he knows the moment that he's out of office, he's done. He's absolutely done. He'll probably be flying back to Florida, hang out with his cowardly son, and maybe America gives him cover. I suppose they will. But the bottom line is, the only way out for Netanyahu, literally, is to escalate the war. That's it. That's his only option. And he is so narcissistic and so dangerous that he really is a good candidate for the Antichrist. This man cares more about his own self and his own self-preservation than he even does about the Jewish state of Israel that he represents. He really does. And now, again, as Yvonne has just said, the Samson option. This country is nuclear armed. It has just referred, all at the top levels of its government, has referred to the Palestinians as animals and that they would be treated as such. They have also cut off all water, food, electricity. They bombed hospitals, churches, schools. They hit ambulance workers. They hit aid workers. Only in Britain do we hear like an uproar now because 3 British nationals died. Never mind the 13,000, 14,000 children, the women, the non-combatants. So when we look at the history of this nation, we look at the psychopathic, narcissistic nature of its head of state. We look at the government itself, Smoldrich and the whole lot of them, and then we look at the constituents of the Jewish state, who literally, regardless of the good Israeli citizens who were terribly outnumbered, the vast majority, like 85% or more, wanted to flatten Gaza, completely flatten it. So when you add all of this up, really what becomes the question is, how long has humanity been asleep? How long have we been allowing this to happen? It is, we are very much on the brink. We are either going to find ourselves watching the mushroom clouds rising, at which point I'm just going to laugh to myself like, man, I tried my best. Or we're going to turn this world around and we're going to use the law, which I took an oath to protect and defend as a Marine in the first Gulf War. I know that if we descend into complete and total impunity, as we pretty much have been, the only way is nuclear war. And make no mistake, those who are in power are so crazy. And how about Zuckerberg and all of these rich billionaires with underground compounds, or Denver Airport with city below. This is a dangerous game, and these people are capable of blowing up the world because they believe they can live underground. That is where we are right now. Either we're going to change this or we're good.
But Mr. Ken O'Keefe, at what price? I mean, does Netanyahu have some kind of interest in widening the scope of this conflict in the Middle East and pushing for confrontation with Iran? And where is the USA in this calculation and this equation? Why is the Zionist entity trying to drag the USA to get involved in this conflict?
Well, you know, it was Eisenhower who would know. He's a traitor as well. But President Eisenhower who warned us about the military-industrial complex. The interests of BlackRock, which pretty much owns everything now at this point. And who owns BlackRock? This is what this whole censorship thing that we've been doing that doesn't allow us, even calling it the Zionists. This is the Jewish state of Israel. And every Jew in the world has the right. They don't like the Ethiopians, but Jewish people can go and run and hide in the Jewish state of Israel where they have no extradition treaties. We have blood diamonds, we have organ trafficking, we have sex trafficking, we have war crimes, we have genocide. We have the whole lot there, and they can run there with no extradition and hide. And now, because of their arrogance, they've treated my family in Gaza as if they are animals, literally. Worse than animals. Animals get treated better than the Palestinians, literally, in many parts of the world. So the equation is indeed that dangerous. There's no interest in it. And getting to your question, to be clear, if you're thinking from a sane perspective, if you're thinking as a human being who's got a heart, it makes no sense. It makes no sense at all. But if you are a psychopath, and you need to get in the mind of a psychopath, if you get into the mind of a psychopath, a sociopath, a narcissist, where you have zero compassion or humanity within you, then it begins to make perfect sense. It really does. It's necessary for people to think along the lines of what is a psychopath. These are the people, many of whom have gone on Epstein's Lolita Express and who are involved in raping children, literally, and it's on videotape. This is not theory anymore. This is not theory. This is fact. So us moral people who have a heart, who actually care, we are not brought into the fabric of the politics and the decision makers. No, the corrupt are the ones that get those positions. And the policies we see reflect that. And it all makes sense when you understand it that way.
Mm-hmm. So, Mrs. Yvonne Ridley, do you think that the entire region will be actually dragged eventually into this all-out war?
Well, I'm hoping that the common sense of ordinary citizens around the world will rein in their governments. One thing that we have to thank the Palestinians for is that with their heroic resistance, we have discovered what a sham Western democracy is, because it has allowed moral depravity, savagery, and violence, which shows no sign of abating, being unleashed on the Palestinian people. And I think that the future of the world now is in the hands of a few people, and it's not the people in power. There are peace activists like myself who are prepared to go on a boat to Gaza to break the siege and try and highlight what is going on there. Some people say it's a suicide mission. I don't know. All I know is that hundreds of good, honest citizens who are terrified like hell that this action in the Middle East is going to suck us all into another world war. We're making a stand and we're sailing into Gaza on Sunday. Now, I understand that there are 3 ships carrying aid with the Turkish charity İHA, but I also understand that there are hundreds of people who are the owners of little boats who are sailing into the Eastern Mediterranean as we talk now, who want to show their solidarity and their actions with the people of Palestine, who at the moment are going through an unprecedented hardship. I've seen hardened aid workers in absolute tears, bereft, because they are watching babies die of starvation. This is the 21st century, and Israel is using starvation as a weapon of war. Some of the Palestinians are now looking like the skeletal victims of the Holocaust, who, we were told never forget. Well, some of us haven't forgotten, and some of us are having to take action and put our own lives on the line to stop this genocidal behavior. And as I said before, I salute the Algerian government for making a stand. Sadly, the rest of the Arab world is silent at the moment, and they will be remembered for their silence. They will be remembered for their silence in this genocide.
Perfect. Let me get Mr. Lawrence Walker back to the discussion. Mr. Lawrence Walker, we see the potential of such consequences, of a direct Zionist military strike on Iranian oil and gas facilities actually could have a great impact on global energy supplies and prices. If we look at this scenario, how bad do you think this will be?
Yes, obviously I don't want to sort of speculate on what Israel may do or how this conflict may develop further. But, Iran, I suppose, produces around 3 million barrels a day of oil. It also produces, or exports about 18 billion cubic meters a year of gas. So, any kind of strike, obviously, on the infrastructure would have an impact. I think as a sort of a rule of thumb for oil, if you're talking maybe about 1 million barrels a day change, could maybe trigger a sort of $5 or $6 move. You sort of put together some sums on that. Obviously, a lot of it depends also how much demand there is for the fuel at particular times. So, we've had, I think, some reports out last week on Friday from the International Energy Agency predicting a bit of a slowdown in demand growth for oil this year. So that may help in that respect. In terms of obviously the exports, as I mentioned with the the Sea of Hormuz, if that gets blocked, if this becomes a wider issue, then we're talking bigger volumes. We're talking about exports of gas from Qatar. We're talking exports of gas from United Arab Emirates, and potentially a much larger impact on supply and therefore prices.
Thank you indeed. Moving on with our informational news now, U.S. President Joe Biden condemned the Iranian attacks on the Zionist entity, stating his intention to discuss a unified response with the group of G7 leaders. Biden conveyed this statement during a phone call with the Prime Minister of the entity, according to a statement from the White House. The statement also mentioned Biden's plan to convene with G7 counterparts to coordinate a joint diplomatic reaction to Iran's actions. Additionally, the G7, in a statement following a virtual meeting of state leaders, accused Iran of instigating a potentially uncontrollable regional escalation. The statement affirmed the G7's readiness to counter any further destabilization in the Middle East and emphasized the importance of all parties exercising restraint. Similarly, the President of the European Council, Charles Michel, announced that the European Union summit is scheduled for next Wednesday and Thursday to address the situation in the Middle East. In a blog post, Michel reiterated the U.S. condemnation of Iran's actions against the Zionist entity, labeling it as an unacceptable attack. Additionally, the EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Josep Borrell, characterized Tehran's response as an unprecedented escalation escalation and a significant threat to regional security in a blog post on his official platform. Mr. Kanokif, Iran's military action was based on Article 51 of the United Nations Charter regarding legitimate defense in response to the Zionist aggression on the Iranian consulate in Damascus. Yet, we see here the West immediately condemned in this retaliation, when on the other hand, it claims that the Zionist entity simply defended itself on October 7th against Hamas. How do you comment on that?
It makes me chuckle because it's nonsensical. You would expect an elementary school kid with a base level of history and law to speak more intelligently than our so-called Western leaders. Again, I mean, if we reverse the situation, let's say that any country attacked, as Yvonne said earlier, a British embassy or an American embassy. World War III would be instant. We would attack and obliterate whoever did that. But when the enemy, the chosen enemy, Israel's enemy, I mean, who has it been trying to get us into a fight with Iran now? A country that's not had any wars except two for the last 700 years. The imposed war, the Iran-Iraq war, and then this one, if we count that as the second. Aside from that, that's 700 years of not invading, occupying, but we continuously hear the Islamic Republic of Iran. We don't call it the Jewish State of Israel, I do. It's the Jewish State of Israel, and it's the Islamic Republic of Iran. We hear Islam being rubbished and lied about continuously. Islamophobia and all sorts of mischaracterizations of Islam, that's just normal, and that's acceptable. But we have to tap dance around the Jewish state. We have to tap dance. We can't even say Jew. Why can't we say that? Again, this nonsense, these politicians, they don't represent our constituent. They don't represent the Western people. They don't. I said this in a Hard Talk interview 21 years ago. The UN does not represent the world community. The governments of England do not represent the community or the people of England. The government of the United States does not represent the interests of the people of America. The government of Canada, the government of Australia, the government of Austria, none of them. Well, how about the farmers? We got farmers here who are being cut off. We're going to be out of food supply soon. If we don't wake up in the West and really call out our corrupt politicians who are really, in America for sure, treason, aiding and abetting a foreign sovereign entity at the destructive force of your own nation, that is treason. These people are either blindingly stupid and should be fired for incompetence, criminal incompetence, or they need to be replaced by people who actually have some honor, integrity, and a couple of brain cells that actually work. Otherwise, are we supposed to believe these people are stupid? How can they possibly make these statements and condemn Iran's response to a blatant act of terrorism against their embassy? It's nonsensical.
Let me bring Dr. Shafiq Osman now into our debate. He unfortunately joined us a little late. Dr. Shafiq Osman, how do you assess the intervention of the USA and the G7 in this conflict? And what kind of international relations or geopolitical relations are we expecting after this?
Yes, thank you. And sorry again for being a little bit late. And yeah, I mean, that was quite surprising, the reaction of the West, especially when I just heard what they want to do at the level of G7. I mean, Iran, of course, I mean, just exercise its right, I mean, to retaliate. I mean, after what has happened last week in Damascus. So I mean, it's completely, I would say, nonsense now. I mean, to have such a hype in the West, especially. I mean, and I would say it could be, of course, some kind of a pretext. I mean, to now continue to supply arms to Israel, to continue to equip Israel with military equipment, and also to try to get some kind of new image, I mean, for Israel in the conflict. As you know, I mean, over the past months, I mean, the image of Israel has been completely tarnished and in the West. And I fear that this is some kind of an argument now, I mean, to continue to support Israel. And I heard Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, saying yesterday, I think, that Israel has the right to defend itself. But I don't know. I mean, this is kind of discourse that we've been hearing from day one, and that was no more applicable. And now it's back into the normal mainstream discourse that they have the right to define itself, but they have attacked. So now it's a question of retaliation. So. And Iran said, of course, I mean, this is one action that we did, and if ever there's any further action, I mean, we'll have further action. So there's much hype as usual. There's much fear as usual, but I fear that also that this is kind of they're using it now to continue to supply Israel with arms and military equipment, and to use once again, after 6 months, this argument of Israel has the right to defend itself.
Mrs. Yvonne Ridley, as Mr. Kanoukief was saying, and just now Dr. Shafiq Osman was saying, the West is clearly to blame for the escalation. And here, this is underlined by Russia earlier. Russia's foreign minister actually made a statement in which he blamed squarely the West for such escalation. What measures can we actually expect to be implemented to address this situation and prevent further escalation, Mrs. Yvonne, in light of what is happening?
What we need is for the OIC and the other Arab states to come together and turn off the oil. That's what we need. We need them to say, until you in the West behave in a responsible, civilized manner, we are not going to trade with you anymore. You are savages. You are primitive. Your behavior in Gaza and your behavior towards your allies in Tel Aviv is wholly unacceptable. The Vienna Conventions should be followed. And yet this unprecedented violation of bombing the embassy in Iran, in which 16 were killed, including civilians, that sort of behavior is unacceptable. Now, we either have a functioning United Nations, remember why it was formed, on the backdrop of World War II, and we need moral leadership at the moment from the Arab world, and they will take notice if the Arab leaders stand up and find a collective backbone. We saw a hint of it when Joe Biden went out cap in hand and belly danced down the red carpet in Jeddah when he went to meet the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who basically insulted and mocked the President of the United States and refused his 2 requests, and was then seen running around with Putin in Russia and Xi Jinping in China. But now, unfortunately, that brash behavior of the Crown Prince, he's fallen into line, and he is back on his knees towards the West. To the Arab leaders, I would say, for God's sake, rise up, stand up to the West in the way that the Palestinians are doing with their body. They're standing up and are rebelling, rising, resisting. And we have to do that to save this planet, because we are on the abyss of an Armageddon.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Yvonne Ridley, for these insights. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of this special coverage. Thank you to all my panel of guests for being here. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, our special coverage comes to a close. Thank you for tuning into our channel. Until next time, have a good one.